specifically in the state is impacted. And Barbara's going to break down the major two categories for that.
Thanks, Jason. Hopefully all of you will recall this from your annual mandatory ethics training, but just as a refresher, because I know this can be confusing. So the revolving door prohibition is in section 5-45 of the State Officials and Employees Ethics Act, which I'm just going to call the Ethics Act because that's way too long of a name. It applies to everybody who's subject to the Ethics Act. The big differences between categories in revolving door are just your job duties, your job title, your job duties, and what you have to do before you leave state employment or for 1 year after you've left state employment. So with revolving door, you'll hear the terms C list and H list a lot. So in case it has previously been unclear or if you've forgotten, that term C list comes from the subsection 5-45C of the Ethics Act. That's the section that requires agencies to maintain lists of people who have personal and substantial involvement in certain contracting, licensing, or regulatory decisions. Those C-list people, those are the folks who have to seek a determination from the Office of the Executive Inspector General before accepting non-state employment. Those are the C-listers. Then we have the H-listers. They are described in a different subsection of the Ethics Act, that's subsection 5-45H. But in the H and H list, that's a list of titles and roles, people who are subject to the revolving door prohibition, but they do not have to seek that Executive Inspector General determination before they accept non-state employment. So we've got our C list, we've got the H list, and those are the subsections of the Ethics Act that those terms come from. So what does it mean to be a C-list employee? I think a lot of the folks listening into this are probably themselves C-list employees. Essentially, if you are on the C list, if you're a C-list employee, it means you are restricted from post-state employment, or, and it's not just employment, so I think you can get around this by being, oh, I'm an independent contractor. So it's employment with or receiving compensation from specific entities or people or whatever because of, again, quote, personal and substantial involvement in contracting, regulatory, or licensing decisions. And we're going to talk a little bit more in detail about what personal and substantial involvement means and what those types of decisions are. So again, the big thing C-listers need to keep in mind is before accepting non-state employment, on being seriously offered non-state employment, they want to accept, they need to notify the Office of the Executive Inspector General before accepting. And that is while you're still a state employee and for 1 year after you leave state employment. So then the Office of the Executive Inspector General will look at your notification, they'll look at the information provided, and issue a written determination as to whether the C-list employee can accept that non-state employment or whether the revolving door prohibition restricts the employee from accepting that non-state employment.
So as Barbara said, we're going to break down a little bit more what types of activities qualify an employee as a C-list employee. So you see here on the slide, there are really 4 sort of large general categories, and we'll break this down. Award or administration of state contracts. And let's be clear here, state contracts do include things like grants. Those are a type of contract between the state and an entity, as well as competitively and non-competitively awarded state contracts. So when you think of procurement duties and procurement contracts come through, if you're involved in the award or fiscal administration, ongoing oversight of those contracts, you would qualify as a C-list employee. Additionally, if you're involved in issuance of state contract change orders, usually in excess of $25,000, where the trigger is for this in cumulative value, but the state contract change orders, for those of you that may not be as familiar with the procurement area, those are significant changes to the contractual activities that are occurring. So if you're involved in oversight of that, you may land on the C list as well. And as Barbara mentioned earlier, licensing decisions and regulatory decisions also. So when you think about licensure, you think about whether or not, say, a hospital is authorized to continue operating, or whether perhaps in the regulatory framework, whether or not a cannabis grow operation can continue operating properly to perform its growth, or a distributor for that nature. There are state employees and state officials who are involved in the oversight of those processes, in the issuance and approval of the licenses, renewals thereof, and making sure that inspections are performed in the regulatory framework. Folks that are in those job duties those types of involvement, that type of activity lands you on the C list.
And I'm gonna jump in for a second and say that the C list in a lot of agencies is literally a list that the ethics officer maintains. At the very least, in many agencies, when somebody is hired and onboarded, or when they are promoted, some combination of HR or the ethics officer or whomever will go through their job duties and notify them that they're on the C list, so that they're on notice from day one of their employment. Hey, you're not thinking about leaving now, but 2, 3, 10, 20 years down the line, when you finally decide to leave this great place, you're going to have to seek this OEIG determination. And in our agency, we make those determinations at the time of hire, and then we also review the C-list acknowledgement annually as part of people's performance evaluation, so that they are reminded, hey, this still exists, you're still going to have to do this eventually. And it's helpful too when somebody is promoted, because people, you might not start state employment as a C-list employee, but then your job duties change, you learn, you grow. Now you are in charge of those kinds of decisions. You can also go from being a C-list employee to an H-list employee. And we also have H-list designations and notifications when people step into those roles.
Okay. So moving further into an analysis on C-list employees, we're going to look into, as Barbara mentioned, we have these terms personally and substantially involved. And you may be asking yourself, okay, well, what does it mean to participate personally in these decisions? And it is somewhat self-describing. You're directly involved in the decision being made. You may be the person signing off on the license. You may be the person signing off on the inspection, performing the inspection directly. It also, however, could be personal involvement by way of a supervisory role. You may be the head of a group of inspectors, and you review all of the inspection reports that come in on all the facilities that are regulated, and you direct and actively supervise that. That's personal involvement as well. What does it mean to participate substantially in the involvement in the matter? Again, somewhat self-describing. It is something that is significant, something that's substantial, something that's material effect upon the issue in question. It's important to recognize also that your employee or official participation may be substantial, even if you are not the deciding party. So if, let's say, that inspection comes up and recommends that the inspection should be approved, the regulated entity should continue operating properly, you may be the one making that recommendation. You don't have the final signature on it. Maybe your director who does that. You may still be considered to have participated substantially because you provided very relevant and important and material information in the decision-making process. And so that's why you have to look at the actual facts and circumstances of any particular given case or given employee's relationship to a would-be employer. That's why the EIG has this long process. You may also be asking yourself, why are we using these sort of descriptions of personal and substantial? Is this something coming from state statute? Are there definitions in the Ethics Act? And unfortunately, the answer to that question is no. Where this comes from, in fact, if you'll see at the bottom of the slide, is the Code of Federal Regulations. State decisions on this matter from the Commission in the past and up to the present, as well as how the OEIG analyzes this question, is using this language from the federal level because, unsurprisingly, the federal level also deals with similar problems and wants to analyze similar questions to protect the public's interests. So with that being said, we may also maybe kind of visualize this in an example. So let's imagine we have a place called the Department of Fun, which oversees water park safety, and Midge is a water park safety instructor. She does quarterly site visits to the water parks in her assigned region to assure they're following Department of Fun regulations here in Illinois. She doesn't make the licensing decisions herself, but she does issue quarterly reports that the decision makers rely upon when issuing the licenses or beginning enforcement procedures. So as you can see in how we just described this, Midge would have been someone who participated personally and substantially because of her duties in that circumstance. She would be a C-list employee subject to potential restriction. And now I'll hand it back off to Barbara to talk more about the H-listers, who are the high-level employees.
All right, so talked about our friend Midge, who was on the C list because she is personally and substantially involved in making those regulatory and licensing decisions. So that's C list. Let's talk about the H list. H-list employees and officers are folks who are restricted from accepting employment or receiving compensation or whatever because of the high-level policy-making or other influential decision-making, shot-calling senior positions. So that includes members of a commission or board created by the Illinois State Constitution, people whose appointment is subject to the advice and consent of the Senate, heads of departments, commissions, boards, divisions within departments, bureaus within departments, authorities, other administrative units. So if you are the boss of a bureau, you're going to be on the H list. You might have personal and substantial involvement, but also your influence and authority is going to kind of be imputed to you as an H lister. That's really the key with these folks is regardless of their personal and substantial involvement in day-to-day decision-making, their name's on the letterhead, or they are in charge of the people who have that personal and substantial involvement. So a certain level of influence and authority is imputed to them by virtue of their title. So this also extends not just to programmatic people, but also chiefs of staff, deputy chiefs of staff, associate chiefs of staff, assistant chiefs of staff, deputy governors, any other position with equivalent managerial oversight. So again, H-listers are people who do not have to seek that OEIG determination before accepting non-state employment, but that does not by any means that they are home free to go work for whomever they want. Their challenge is that they need to go through their own analysis when they want to leave state employment and figure out, okay, this place I want to go work, what contact has my agency had with them? Does my name show up on their license? Even if I haven't had any personal and substantial involvement in those decisions, am I over people who did have personal and substantial involvement? What do I need to consider before I accept that job? So let's continue our Illinois Department of Fun example. Let's say that Midge's boss, Barbie, is the deputy director of the Bureau of Water Parks at the Department of Fun. So she's not out there like Midge doing quarterly site visits. She's not getting personally and substantially involved in every water park, licensing, or enforcement beef or whatever, but she is the head of the Bureau. So Midge has that personal and substantial involvement. She makes recommendations to Barbie. Barbie issues the official decisions. Her signature is the one that is on the thing saying, yes, we accept your settlement, bad water park, or you get your license, good water park. So that even though Barbie is not personally and substantially involved, she's just signing up. Honestly, Barbie's not that great of Bureau deputy director. She's just signing off of whatever people put in front of her. But that level, that type of influence and authority and decision-making is still imputed to her because of her title, because of her role. And if she wants to go and work for some water park somewhere, she's not allowed to just go wherever and do whatever. The revolving door prohibition still applies to her. She just doesn't have to seek that C-list determination.